In the height of COVID quarantine back in 2020, I decided to play Persona 4 Golden after getting recommendations from my friends. This was shortly after I finished my own playthrough of Persona 5, which is my first recent foray into JRPGs after a long while. I enjoyed my playtime on Persona 5 mainly because of its engaging gameplay, accompanied by the great style choices, the music, and the unique storyline that the developers made. Persona is a long-standing JRPG series that stemmed from the Shin Megami Tensei universe. Persona games usually revolve around a high school student that lives a double life of a regular, normal student and an adventurer slash dungeon crawler wielding the power of Persona that aids them in battle. After playing through Persona 4 Golden, I found that I personally enjoyed it more than Persona 5 and is still my favorite among all the other Persona games that I've played. Mainly because its plot, setting, and content themes are much more interesting, fitting, and relatable to me compared to the others. As much as I would have liked to cover all of the mainline Persona games, I feel like that would take too much time, and ultimately I decided on sticking to Persona 4 Golden for this video essay. I'll be going through this video by talking about the game and its use of the different concepts from the modules that we've learned, the game narrative, game aesthetics, discourse and context, and lastly my overall thoughts on how everything pieced together makes Persona 4 Golden as great and timeless as it is. This is a dive into Persona 4 Golden. Chapter 1 Game Narrative. Persona 4 Golden starts off with Yu Narukami, or whatever name you want to call him, but we'll refer to him as that for now. Yu Narukami just moved to Inaba from the big city and he's staying there for a year while his parents are abroad for work. The game's story spans over about a year and mainly revolves around the mystery of the serial killings that started happening in town shortly after the protagonist arrives. The game's narrative is quite unique in a sense that we, the players, live out almost the daily life of Narukami as he goes to a new school, meets new friends, discovers the power of Persona, discovers the world of the TV world, solves the mysteries regarding the serial murders. That's quite a lot for a normal high school student. The game's gameplay is split in half. With the first part, you're just living out a normal high school life, and it's basically a student simulator where you just do mundane tasks such as go to school, hang out with friends, and do other activities. And the second half of the game is you exploring the dungeons. So you can just think of that for now as basis for this next part. As we go through the game, we span over every single day, every single month for the whole year, with the exception of some minor time skips for plot reasons. And this is emphasized with the calendar date that's always visible on the upper right corner of the UI when you're exploring the world and going through the story dialogue as normal. We witness and experience Narukami's life as we decide for him what he does on a certain day, whether he wants to hang out with a friend, or go to a shrine, or if he wants to go study at the library. The character's narrative is literally up to us, with what the game provides at least. More on this later. JRPGs are usually long storylines that can blow up game times to multiple tens or even hundreds of hours. That meme of a day one of a JRPG versus the final boss of a JRPG, like day one he pets a cat and like the final mission he like kills a god or something, applies here as well. However, Persona 4's story is quite fitting in a sense where the setting itself, along with the other games' style choices, gives the game a very casual feel, which coincides with its casual setting as a resident of a town where literally almost nothing happens. Aside from the murders, but we'll ignore that for now. It's quite wonderful as when we say we play video games to escape reality. It sort of gets magnified in this case because our escape to Persona 4's world takes us into a reality where we're almost living in a mostly laid-back environment, living out in a run-of-the-mill town, just hanging out with friends, attending school, living out a normal student life. If we're not out there exploring dungeons, that is. We experience every aspect of Narukami's life Because we're not only there when it's dungeon crawling time and it's time to defeat monsters, but we also share moments from living out his daily life. We're responsible for the bonds that he forms with his friends that affects his abilities to beat his enemies in the TV world in combat mode. And this comes in the form of social links. Social links is a gameplay mechanic where the relationships that Narukami makes and nurtures affects the effectiveness of his ability to work with those same friends in combat during the dungeon crawling phase of the game. Now, this isn't just a click of a button and text appears type of thing. In game, we need to actively think about and level with the other characters so that we make the correct choice. When you make mistakes, the game punishes you by delaying their social link level up with that character, which in turn affects you, the player, and you experience the implications of your decisions, whether these are good or bad decisions, and this is consistent with other gameplay mechanics that carry over from student mode to combat mode. This also applies to what Narukami does with his free time, and therefore the skills that he develops. Persona 4 turns this into a game mechanic called attributes. There are 5 attributes that Narukami can develop, which gives avenues for his narrative to change according to the player's will. Knowledge can be worked on by studying in the library. Courage can be developed when Narukami works at his part-time job in this eerie hospital. Expression can be developed when he participates in drama club practice. You get the point. There's a lot of ways to develop the different attributes, and it's safe to say that we not only watch Narukami as he develops himself alongside his relationships and goals, but we also feel and experience every single thing that Narukami experiences because we are directly responsible for what happens to him with how the plot template forms. And some narrative plot points won't be reached if you lack a certain attribute level, which can again affect both the student life similar part of the game and eventually the combat part. Narukami is a product of what we perceive him to be, co-authored with what the developers intended. We develop relationships with very nuanced characters that celebrate with you, hurt with you, and overcome hurdles with you. We might make mistakes along the way, such as saying the wrong thing or by not doing something that helps nurture the bonds that you have with your friends, and that's completely alright. This also translates into gameplay, as when we form tighter bonds with our friends in game, we also get stronger in combat, because we work better with them due to the tighter bonds that we made and formed through Narukami to those other characters. This well thought out engineering of gameplay systems and mechanics and story elevates the player experience, heightening the delivery of the story and immersing players through a medium that can only work well the way Persona 4 does it. Chapter 2: Game Aesthetics. Persona 4 heavily uses the color yellow for its design. You can see it in many aspects of the game, from the user interface, to the TV world, even to the name. Okay, it's similar enough. Every mainline Persona game since Persona 3 has had a main color theme. For Persona 3 it's blue, and for Persona 5 it's red. I think that they deliberately did this, and because they did this, whether it was intentional or not, makes it more memorable. Like, I associate yellow to Persona 4 and I associate red to Persona 5 because they emphasize those colors heavily in their games, and they do it really well. It becomes easy to market if it's memorable, and is one of the reasons why I think this 14-year-old game still looks good today, despite it clearly being a graphically inferior to many other games from the same time. The style that they used is very cartoony, especially with the graphics and animations that don't really take themselves too seriously. In Persona 5, since the game takes on a very stylish theme, characters and their animations are very smooth and look very similar to movement you'd see out from an action cartoon or movie. In Persona 4, they literally run into a random smoke cloud when you perform an all-out attack, with words straight out of a comic coming out of it, which is a far cry when you look at Persona 5's all-out attack animation, which again clearly banks on the stylish and badass type of animation. Not only will you see the cartoony theme in combat animations, but also in the style of in-game models as well, where characters clearly have huge heads for their bodies and everything is scaled weirdly. Like I previously mentioned, Persona takes the game narrative by letting players witness and experience the daily life of the protagonist. On the top right hand of the UI, you can see the date, day, and time of whatever's happening on the screen. Similarly to how when you live every day, you also know the date, so it's kind of simulating that feeling. This calendar-type storytelling and narrative is crucial to Persona's successful formula that still plays well even after 20 plus years of doing. Not only does Persona rely on its very striking and distinct stylization and design choices, but very enjoyable to say the least, and it's designed the way it is, that I think that it's easy to listen to this same music over and over again as you go through the daily life of Narukami. You can easily sink hundreds of hours without getting bored or sick of the music. Maybe it's the fact that these are songs composed and sang by Japanese singers, but are in English, which gives it kind of a quirky vibe that is easy to digest and process, while paying attention to the more important things on the screen. Not only is the music easy to listen to, but it's quite clear that these are songs that are made for the game's scenes and not the other way around. These songs amplify the emotion that the game wants you to feel whenever something's happening on screen. For example, after defeating the enemy, you get a very upbeat song. When you're going about your daily tasks such as attending class, you get the very popular when something weird or supernatural happens, you get which really gives off an eerie vibe. When the scene revolves around a character accepting their flaws as part of who they are,
you're me.
which sort of gives off this feeling that weight is lifted off your shoulders. You get the point. But this is highly subjective and may only be just me. Clearly, they really designed the music revolving around the game and its mechanics, theme, and scenes. And it really pays off here, as this is the type of music that you can come back to after years of not listening to it, and it will still sound as good as you remember. All of these style elements really blend together with the setting and the world building of Persona 4. The game being set in a town designed to be very rural and slow-paced, the design decisions are consistent with the intended atmosphere of the setting. Character designs that just make sense for a setting like this, common laid-back vibe of the town, and the activities you can do in it. And of course, the music that just really does its job really well, and allows you to experience the game in its entirety in the best way possible. Chapter 3: Discourse and Context. Persona 4 tackles themes of truth, friendship, struggle, and relationships. It is a coming-of-age story where the main character get out from their usual daily lives and exit their comfort zone to better themselves as human beings. Oftentimes, the power of friendship is cited in many similar media plots and storylines, such as in anime or other JRPGs. But in this case, it's really more than that. For Persona 4's case, they don't just sprinkle this as a difference maker in the final battle, but it is definitely a running theme in the game's narrative that explores the effect of your relationships in overcoming different obstacles and aspects of life and growing more as a person in lieu of it. Nuance is what Persona 4 does best in showcasing this, as nothing really is black and white with any of the relationships and bonds that you form with your friends in game, and it shows the effects of how relationships can flow into other aspects of one's life and their behavior towards it. Persona 4 also tackles the topic of truth a lot in the story. For a murder mystery game, it is quite fitting in my opinion, as the main characters also try to solve the murders, which is kind of funny and charming in a sense. Persona 4, through its plot, showcases that sometimes truth isn't what we want it to be, and that we oftentimes want to change it, whether through self-deception or outright lies. And the game manifests this through the existence of the TV world and the fog that seems to never go away inside it. Almost every dungeon in the TV world revolves around the character who subconsciously made it with their own self-deception, manifested as fog in the TV world, and a shadow form of themselves that embody the part of themselves that they're trying to suppress. By denying their flaws, ignoring their shortcomings, and telling themselves that it's not part of who they are, they make the fog thicker in the TV world, which, for a lack of a better explanation, makes the enemy stronger and puts the town of Inaba in more danger. This is usually resolved with the characters finally realizing that the only way they can truly deal with these issues is by accepting that these flaws are a part of them, and facing the truth right with their heads held high is the only way. In the game, they literally face their shadow self and fight them. It's a very poetic take on dealing with one's insecurities, which I believe they did really well. Another minor point of discourse for Persona 4 is the way they handled Kanji and Naoto's characters. A little background is that Kanji has always been seen as a delinquent student, sporting a very rough look, but deep inside he's always had a soft side. A side that he thinks he cannot show to other people or else people would ridicule him for it, plus some other deeply rooted trauma that involves a past incident that made him think like that. His rough outer demeanor has always just been to hide his feminine side, a justification for himself that he's tough, strong, and masculine as he could be. By the end of his dungeon, he learns that it doesn't matter that whether he should be a tough guy or not on the outside, but what really matters is that he stays true to himself, and he doesn't have to think of what others think of him. I think this really opens up the conversation of gender roles and expression really well, and gives a look into the lives of people who struggle with these things. This is a similar case with Naoto, where she sports a more masculine vibe in the way she dresses and presents herself, all because she claims that she is taken more seriously that way. And the fact that she's a girl shouldn't affect the credibility of what she says in her line of work, which in case is that she's a student detective. Now this is a highly debated topic, but I believe that Naoto as a character really sheds light on women in the workplace and how they are often mistreated by misogynistic tendencies. Now some other people believe there's more to Naoto than this, but I digress. I'm just glad that the characters in this game really shed light on actual real-world issues that should be talked about, and Persona 4 does this really effectively. It is even more relevant today than ever. Chapter 4, Closing Thoughts. With all of this in mind, Persona 4 truly is an experience that I really do recommend everyone to undergo. Despite it being 14 years since its release, it still feels relevant and fun, thanks to its engaging storylines, very distinct and striking aesthetics, well thought out and designed characters, and ever-relevant context that sparks reflection amongst its players. Tried and tested gameplay formula of the Persona series, which is improved upon from its predecessor, and one of, if not the best narratives I've seen in video games, that is engineered to work well with other game mechanics and allows players to co-author the game's narratives, which in turn also immerses the player and invests them into the lives of the world of Persona and the protagonists. Overall, all of these well-directed aspects of Persona 4 still make for one of the best gameplay experiences, and is also the reason why it still receives high praise from the fans until today, and is also why it became one of the best-selling RPGs on Steam when it was ported to PC a few years ago. This game definitely allowed me to escape from reality when the pandemic was in full swing, and I was stuck at home all day. I was able to truly immerse myself in this game whilst really giving me a reality check and reflection of my own life at the same time. It's really thanks to all of these things that truly make Persona 4 one of the greatest games of all time. Thank you.